But before I could even process that anonymous text, the stakes went sky high. A massive, sudden storm hit Lake Crestwood, 5 inches of rain, trees down, total chaos. The old cabin roof surrendered. Dawn revealed a gaping hole right above. My bedroom. I immediately began repairs, relying on skills I learned working construction summers in my teens. It was honest, hard work, and neighbors, not HOA members, just real neighbors, stopped by with coffee and sandwiches. This was the community Evelyn couldn't control. People helping people, outside the rulebook. Evelyn, however, saw the storm, not as a disaster, but as an opportunity. Within hours, she used the emergency chaos to secure a temporary, vague authorization from the overwhelmed county emergency office, claiming the HOA had authority over all lakefront properties, including one to ensure structural integrity. This was next-level overreach, using a natural disaster as a pretext for a power grab. 3 days into my repairs, I was served with a hand-delivered court summons. The HOA was suing me for willful violation of emergency safety protocols, seeking an injunction to stop my repairs immediately, and they submitted the falsified boundary map to the judge. This was a line they couldn't uncross. That night my phone rang. It was Bethany Cole, the HOA treasurer. Her voice was thin, frantic. "Mr. Riley, I can't live with this. Evelyn and Marcus. They doctored the map right before filing the emergency injunction. I was there. They photoshopped the boundary line to include your cabin." She was terrified, but she was willing to testify. Evelyn was risking the entire association's legal standing for her own resort commission. It was all about winning, at any cost. The next morning, Sheriff Donovan arrived for the 5th time, carrying the court order forcing me to cease all work. Evelyn was right behind him, triumphant, calling out, "I told you couldn't win, Mr. Riley." I smiled, reached behind my door, and pulled out my thick folder. "Thanks for coming, Sheriff," I said calmly. "I actually need one more witness." I handed him the folder, the original boundary documents, Bethany's sworn statement about the falsification, and a meticulous log of every single harassment incident, photograph, and witness account. The smile evaporated from Evelyn's face. Then I showed him the Meridian Syndicate development proposal, with the board's $50,000 commission clearly highlighted. Within 24 hours, I filed a countersuit against the HOA, Evelyn, and Marcus Kane for harassment, document fraud, and abuse of process. The courthouse was packed on the day of the hearing. Everyone from the lake was there. Marcus Kane strutted, and with 2 expensive city lawyers couldn't help but shoot me a condescending smirk. "A programmer playing lawyer," he muttered loud enough for the first row to hear. "This should be entertaining." Judge Eleanor Watkins, a veteran jurist with eyes that missed nothing, stared down at the proceedings. Marcus led with their falsified map. I countered, presenting the original 1995 boundary document and the Montana Property Independence Statute. The judge immediately saw the conflict. Marcus tried to pivot, dramatically presenting a document with what he claimed was my signature, proving I'd agreed to the rules. I presented the forensic handwriting analysis I had commissioned preemptively. "Your Honor," I said, "that signature is a forgery." Then came Bethany Cole's testimony, the treasurer testifying that she watched Evelyn and Marcus use software to move the boundary line. It was devastating. I then presented the resort development documents, proving the financial motive. Murmurs erupted in the gallery. The pivotal moment came when Evelyn herself was on the stand. I pushed her calmly, factually. After 20 minutes of evasiveness, she finally cracked. "The CSA is the only place I felt valued since I was fired," she blurted out, losing all composure. "I built it into something powerful, and I'm not going to let 5 stubborn holdouts ruin everything I've worked for." "Even if that means breaking the law?" I asked quietly. The judge intervened. "I've heard enough." She ruled immediately in my favor. The injunction was dissolved. The HOA was permanently prohibited from enforcing rules on non-members. She turned to Marcus Kane, her voice freezing lava. "I am referring the matter of document fraud to the district attorney's office and you, Counselor Reed." should prepare for a very unpleasant conversation with the Bar Association's Ethics Committee. Evelyn and Marcus left in ruins. But the story wasn't over. In the HOA discovery documents, I found the true hidden weapon, the faded map notation. The whole Lake Crestwood area had been designated a Crestwood Ecological Heritage Zone in 1971, years before the HOA even existed. This designation placed strict limitations on development, prohibiting large-scale commercial projects like the resort permanently. It wasn't just a win, it was a nuclear treaty. The fallout was complete. Evelyn was voted out, forced to sell her home to cover legal costs, and moved away. Marcus Kane faced disbarment. The HOA was forced to pay damages. But the community changed. Jenna was elected the new CSA president on a platform of transparency. The neighbors, HOA and non-HOA alike, formed the Lake Crestwood Preservation Alliance. My blue porch remains, looking sharp as ever. Sheriff Donovan even stopped by off-duty to apologize, admitting he should have questioned Evelyn's authority sooner. I finished my repairs, and now I'm putting all that legal research to use. I'm writing a comprehensive homeowners' rights handbook to help others fight institutional bullies like Evelyn. I realized this was never about a paint color. It was about standing up, protecting something meaningful, and showing that logic and truth can dismantle even the most entrenched power structure. Sometimes to build a true community, you have to be willing to fight for it, even if it means facing the police 5 times and taking on one very angry former queen. So tell me in the comments, have you ever dealt with a neighborhood tyrant? What's the wildest HOA violation you've ever seen? Let's talk about where the line between community standards and outright bullying really is. The sight of the police cruiser, the flashing blue and red against the deep blue of my porch, that's where this story starts. For the 5th time in 3 months, they were rolling up my gravel driveway, weapons ready, acting like I was running a meth lab or something, all because I dared to pick a paint color they didn't approve of. Evelyn Hawthorne, the self-appointed queen of Crestwood Shores, stood across the street, that signature triumphant smirk plastered on her face, convinced she had finally broken me. But what she didn't know, what no one in that pristine, beige-colored community knew, was that I wasn't just bending. I was about to break her reputation, her iron grip, and her dirty little secret deal in the most satisfying legal smackdown this part of Montana had ever seen. Bullies with bylaws expect you to submit, but I'm a software architect. I see a broken system and I don't just complain about it. I fix it, or I crash it. After the pandemic hit, I needed a change of scenery, a place where the internet was decent and the peace was profound. That's how I found the cabin on Lake Crestwood, tucked away on the North Shore. It was one of the original structures from the 70s, all weathered wood and big windows, overlooking the quietest stretch of water. It didn't look like much, but it felt like mine instantly. The closing process was quick, and both my lawyer and the agent confirmed one crucial detail. My property was outside the legal boundary of the Crestwood Shores Association, the local HOA. Pure bliss. The first week was exactly what I needed, just the sound of code compiling and loons calling. But the cabin looked tired, especially the front porch, so I bought a few gallons of deep cobalt blue, not navy, not robin's egg, but a vibrant, unapologetic blue that popped against the pines. I was halfway up the ladder whistling some 80s tune when a shadow fell across the sun-drenched deck. Excuse me, but that color has not been approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I nearly fell off the damn ladder. Below me stood Evelyn Hawthorne, hair like polished silver helmet, wearing a linen blouse so starched it probably crackled when she breathed. Her arms were crossed. Her lips were a thin, disapproving line. She introduced herself as the CSA president, rattling off some nonsense about modification approvals. I climbed down, trying to be polite, and offered my hand. Alex Riley. Nice to meet you, but I think you've got the wrong guy. My property isn't part of your HOA. I showed her the boundary line on my deed map, crystal clear. Her face didn't so much fall as it hardened, her smile turning brittle. While you may be technically outside the boundary, Mr. Riley, we uphold community standards. That blue is garish. It depreciates the harmony we work hard to maintain. She shoved a binder at me. A 50-page rulebook covering everything from the height of your bird feeder to the acceptable angle of your decorative window shutters. Familiarize yourself, she instructed, and repaint immediately. I flipped through it, looked back at her, and said, "With all due respect, Ms. Hawthorne, without membership, these rules are just expensive toilet paper to me." Her eyes narrowed. That's when the war began. Later that day, Jenna Hayes, my neighbor, a cool graphic designer who moved in 6 months before me, dropped by. "You've met the Dragon Lady," she said, giving me a sympathetic eye roll. Jenna lived inside the HOA and was constantly fined for leaving her recycling bin out too long or using the wrong shade of white light bulbs. She explained that Evelyn saw the 5 non-HOA cabins on the North Shore as a personal stain on her immaculate reign. She needed those properties, and she would make our lives hell until we folded. The next morning, the first violation notice was taped to my door, citing unauthorized color selection. I laughed, pinned it to my corkboard, and kept painting. But the notices kept coming. Improper driveway maintenance, unsanctioned water drainage, excessive viewing of the lake. I mean, seriously, excessive viewing? By day 5, Sheriff. Rick Donovan's cruiser was pulling up. Rick was a good guy, a solid, weary-looking man who clearly hated this part of his job. Mr. Riley received a complaint about unauthorized structural modifications. He came in, looked at my deed, looked at the blue porch, sighed, and shook his head. "You're clean, Alex. I'll let Mrs. Hawthorne know my hands are tied." That evening, Judge Walter Brooks, a retired county judge who had lived on the lake since '68, hobbled over. He didn't mince words. "Son, that blue porch isn't an eyesore, it's a financial obstacle. There's a developer, Meridian Syndicate, looking to buy out the whole lakefront for a resort. The HOA board gets a massive commission if they secure every single property, and that includes yours." Suddenly the pettiness had a clear, ugly motive: greed. Brooks told me to document everything, because Evelyn wouldn't stop, and this was only her opening gambit. He was right. The cease and desist letter from the HOA's lawyer, Marcus Kane, arrived soon after, threatening serious litigation. The amusement was officially gone. I started spending my days in the county records office, digging through decades of dusty files. I confirmed the boundaries were clear. I found records of the HOA's predatory behavior towards previous non-HOA owners, pushing them to sell for pennies on the dollar. I also dug into Evelyn's past. She wasn't just a community tyrant. She'd been fired from a major property management firm years ago for vindictive management practices. The HOA presidency wasn't a job for her. It was a personal redemption story, a place to wield absolute power. But the real breakthrough came from an elderly clerk at the records desk. She looked at my file, winked, and pointed me toward the Montana Property Independence Statute of 1985. The MPIS was a forgotten law, written specifically to prevent rural HOAs from doing exactly what Evelyn was doing. It said, crystal clear, that any HOA attempting to enforce aesthetic or usage restrictions on properties not legally incorporated at the time of enforcement faced serious penalties. I had found the silver bullet. I rallied the 4 other non-HOA owners. We met at Brooks's place, shared stories, and formed a secret alliance. Within 24 hours, Evelyn's attacks went nuclear. A massive social media smear campaign, daily violation notices taped to my mailbox for improper mailbox alignment, and the inevitable return of Sheriff Donovan. The 4th visit was about a threatening behavior complaint filed by Evelyn herself after she and Marcus Kane cornered me on my property. That was the moment I stopped being polite. When Marcus, with his expensive suit and cheap cologne, tried to intimidate me with threats of draining my pockets with litigation, I calmly pulled out my phone. "Is that a threat, counselor?" I asked. "The camera. Because the Montana Bar Association might have an opinion about threatening frivolous lawsuits to enforce illegal rules. Evelyn went crimson. Marcus froze. When Sheriff Donovan showed up a few minutes later accusing me of threats, I simply played the video. He watched the whole clip. Evelyn's anger, Marcus's smug arrogance, the thinly veiled threats, and his face went dark. "This is harassment, Alex," he said. And for the first time, he marched right across the street and confronted Evelyn on the spot. I couldn't hear the whole exchange, but the way her body language crumbled, from defiant to shocked, told me everything. Evelyn Hawthorne had just been challenged by local authority, and she wasn't used to losing. I hung up with my dad that night, who reminded me of a fishing trip we took years ago, that feeling of fighting for something meaningful. I was almost ready to quit, but he said, "They're getting desperate, son. That means you're winning." Just then, a text flashed across my screen from an unknown number. "Evelyn falsified the boundary documents after registration. I have proof. County Clerk's Office, 11 a.m. tomorrow." A concerned citizen. Now I knew I wasn't fighting a bully, I was fighting a criminal, and I had my final piece of evidence.